Hello and welcome. I'm Alex DeRoussel. I'm joined here by stats teacher, Mr. Mays. Mr. Mays, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well.
All right, so before we get into the episode, talking about your hobbies and stuff, we'll do a little bit of a icebreaker to get you warmed up.
All right.
So I guess it's the opposite of warm up, I guess,
A
instead of an
warm-up.
icebreaker. So first off, what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Cookie dough.
Cookie
Yeah.
dough? Do you
Love that.
have a specific ice cream place that's like your go-to, or?
Not really. If I've got a gift card to it, then it's my favorite place to go to.
Yeah, makes sense. Save some money. And if you could be any animal in the world, what animal would you be?
I would probably be an eagle of some sort.
Mhm.
You know, I think having wings, being able to fly would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And eagle over any other bird just because they're faster, cooler?
Eagles just because they're awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so kind of getting into the interview here. Obviously, you are a very big Star Wars fan. I don't know if big kind of captures it, but and one of your hobbies is to build droids.
Yes.
And these droids are life-size, they move, they do everything that the real droids, or the droids in the movies do. So can you kind of talk to me, walk me through how you got started in it and, you know,
Sure.
stuff like that?
So probably, oh gosh, it's been probably about 12, 13 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. I went to this Star Wars convention, and it's called Star Wars Celebration, and there's this big convention. It's traveled around the United States, and I've been to almost all of them. But there was a panel there of people that were droid builders. And the panel was called Building a Droid on a Budget. And I always thought that building an R2-D2 would be really cool, but it just seemed like too much for me. Too much money, too much time. I don't know if I had the skill. But when I went to this panel and they explained everything, at the end of it I was like, I can do that. I can do that. And that was kind of my entryway into it. And so from there, there's a whole R2 builders group. It's like a club. I joined the club, which costs nothing to join. It's basically just a online forum with a bunch of information, and I probably just read, you know, information and what other people were doing for about 2 or 3 months before I even started doing any kind of building at all. And I ended up figuring out through the club that there were a couple of people in like the Cincinnati area that were builders as well. And so I kind of connected with them, and then I started building droids. And the interesting thing about it is everybody that asks me is they say, you know, is it a kit that you can buy and you put together? And it really isn't. Within the club, you can decide to build a lot of the parts by yourself. And I've built 3 working droids up to this point over the last, like I said, 12, 13 years or so. 2 of them I built from scratch. Like I got plastic and I cut the plastic and glued it together and, you know, and filled in the seams and everything. And I did all of that pretty much on my own. But my 3rd droid, which I did bring into school earlier this year, is all aluminum. And so there are some people within the club that will build different parts, and they'll say, okay, I'm gonna build the feet and I'll sell the feet to people, and I'm gonna build the domes, I'm gonna sell the domes to people. And so that's what I kind of did with this aluminum droid, is I bought this part from this guy and this part from this person and this part from that person. And once I was able to collect all the parts, and it took a while to get them, it probably took me about 2 years to save up money and then buy a part, and then save up money and then buy a part. I was able to it took me probably about another year and a half to get all the parts together the right way, everything fits together, and then get him painted up and electronically working and everything. So the whole journey for my first droid, it only took me about 8 months from start to finish to get him finished, because I was able to make a lot of parts on my own. But that aluminum one probably took me about, from the time I started collecting parts to when I finished, 4.5 years or so. So it was, and I'm still, even within the last couple weeks, I took some things apart and kind of rebuilt them and improved upon them and then put them back in. So you're never finished. If you're a droid builder, you're never completely finished. You may take a break for a little while, but then you go back to it. So.
And what does your family kind of think about this? Do they know it's kind of like, oh, that's like step back, or do they get involved, or do they
Yeah.
kind of get annoyed with it maybe?
My older son, who went to Mason, he graduated a few years ago. He and I started. We bought a 3D printer and we started actually 3D printing parts to build a BB-8. So I've got the R2s, but we started building a BB-8, and we got to a point where we kind of had to stop, and we haven't been able to go back to it. But he's helped me with that a little bit. But all three of my kids and my wife as well, like, they think it's cool. It's like, oh, there's an R2, but I think it's almost to the point now where they're like, oh, there's an R2. It's in the house. It's like a part of the family. He sits there. He's got his own little spot in on our main floor. And the only reason he's not in the basement is because he weighs almost 300 pounds. So the lighter ones, the plastic ones, are in the basement, but the big R2, the aluminum R2, is on the main floor. But they think it's neat. They like it. They think it's a cool thing. But they're not as like in awe of it when I get him out and move him around, because they're like, oh, I've seen him 100 times. I see him every day. Whereas when I bring him into school or take him to an event, I've taken R2 a couple of different places, the Ronald McDonald House one time. I've taken him to museums before, and then different conventions, comic book conventions and Star Wars conventions, and people are just like, oh, wow, it's awesome. And that makes me feel good too, because I can control R2, but I kind of sit back. He can be over there and be the star of the show, and I can be in the crowd as if I'm watching as well. In fact, sometimes I'll be controlling him and people won't even know. So that's a pretty cool thing too.
Mm-hmm. So kind of one final question.
Sure.
Here. As you talk about, you take him to places. Do you have, a favorite place to take him? And, does seeing people interact with him, is that kind of the reward, or is the reward more of him being together and moving?
Yeah. That's a good question. So the first question, which is like, what's a good place to take him? There's two places that really stood out to me. When you can take an R2 to a Star Wars event, that is really cool, because the people that are there are Star Wars fans as well.
Yeah.
And like I said, I took the last big Star Wars event I went to was a couple years back in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And my son that I was talking about was building the BB-8. We went up to Chicago together, took R2 up there, and we rolled him around this huge convention floor, and little kids and big kids and adults and everybody. It's so much fun just interacting. And so that is very rewarding, just to see the smiles that you can put on somebody else's face. That's a really cool thing about having an R2. Now I get a lot of satisfaction out of it as well. Like when I finished him, it was like, wow, this is an accomplishment. I've spent years doing this, so that was a huge thing. But now that he's finished, I still enjoy tinkering and making things a little bit better, but I really love taking him places. Mm-hmm. So one big thing is the Star Wars celebration, those conventions. The next one is in Anaheim, and it would cost me $1,000 to ship him from Ohio to California. So I'm probably, even if I go to this next Star Wars convention, the big one, I probably won't take R2 that particular time. Too much money. But the other great place to take R2 is the Museum Center, the Cincinnati Museum Center downtown. Mm-hmm. It's got that big rotunda. It's plenty of space. It's also good when he's rolling around on a real flat floor. Yeah. That's better than tiled floor, like in the hallways here at school. Every time he hits that floor, it's like ka-conk, ka-conk, ka-conk. But when it's a flat floor like it is there, you can run him for hours all day long without any issues. And that's just a really cool place to take R2, because it's so picturesque already. And then when you can take pictures of R2 in front of certain things and in different areas, that's really cool too.
Yeah. Well, if you ever are able to catch Mr. Mays and R2 rolling around the hall, be sure to stop by and say hi. And we thank you for all you do for your students, as well as the community bringing in R2. I had the privilege of seeing him, and it was pretty cool.
Appreciate that.
So be sure to catch us next week as we talk with some more teachers and learn about their lives outside of the classroom.